All right, welcome to the 27th edition of Before the Battle. I am Nick Baldwin, and joining me, as always, is the man behind BestFightPicks.com, Daniel Levy, back on the show. Daniel, how's it going?
It's going amazing, man. I mean, the new UFC game came out today. Obviously, there were two huge upsets in the last UFC card at UFC 196. So, man, it's great times for the sport. So I'm excited.
And also joining us, as always, a writer for Sportsnet, and today's knockout, Go Paolo, back on the show, as always. Paolo, thanks again.
What's up, Nick? Uh, Happy to be back, and like you said, a lot of big things are happening in the sport right now, and we got another big, exciting card. Can't wait to break down UFC Brisbane.
Absolutely, and joining us for, I believe, the second time in a row, from Daniel's house, the MMA genius himself. MMA genius, how's it going?
It's going good, man. I'm happy to be on the show, and let's talk some fights.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on to UFC Fight Night 85, Mir versus Hunt, I want to quickly talk about Mr. Val Turdo for a second. So he's spamming our Twitter feeds right now. He's talking some crap to us for picking Conor McGregor last week, which, by the way, we should quickly talk about that Conor McGregor's loss, which was very surprising to Nate Diaz. But Val, I've asked him to come on the show, I believe twice, and both times he's been too scared to come on. And meanwhile, he's talking trash to us for not picking Nate Diaz and not breaking down that fight properly. So if you're gonna make pick big underdogs like that, why don't you come on before the battle and tell us why? So maybe next week. But anyways, let's get right into this week's card. UFC Fight Night 85. Like I said, Mark Hunt taking on Frank Mir. Obviously, the UFC returned to Brisbane, Australia. Overall, a pretty decent card. It's a fight night. You can't expect great fights. Let's start out on the Fight Pass prelims. We got Ross Pearson taking on Chad Laprise. Laprise was supposed to fight Alan Patrick, who's also fighting on this card. That fight fell out because Abel Trujillo was supposed to fight Pearson, and Abel Trujillo was not granted a visa to Australia, so they pulled Laprise from that fight with Patrick to fight Pearson, and now a newcomer, Damian Brown, is fighting Patrick. Daniel, we'll start with you. Do you like Pearson, or do you like the Canadian here?
Well, to put it bluntly, I like Ross Pearson here. And, I mean, the thing with Chad Laprise is that he does have pretty decent output as far as his striking is concerned. But defensively speaking, I mean, not only does he have a declining chin, but I also question his will to win and his mental fortitude, because in that fight with Masu Randuba, the first time he got hit, so he goes down, which okay, Masu Randuba hits really hard, but then he gets back up, and instead of circling away and getting his wits about him, he pulls guard, he flops to his stomach, and then he lets Masu Randuba Trinaldo pound him out for the TKO. So. I think Ross Pearson has more heart and has a bigger will to win. So even if he's a little bit less technical and pretty than Laprise as far as the striking is concerned, I think he'll get it done, man. So I got Ross Pearson for the slight upset.
Now, MMA Genius, do you think Ross Pearson pulls this one off, gets back into the winning column, or will it be Chad Laprise getting back into the winning column?
I definitely got Ross Pearson here. I think I got him at plus 105 already. I think he's going to get the job done. Like Daniel said in Laprise's last fight, when adversity came, he looked for the door right away. It wasn't even like he hesitated. He just gave his back up and got pounded out. Even in his fight before that, if you watch the fight with Brian Barberena, which, in my opinion, Barberena won the last two rounds, you could tell Laprise was just starting to fade, and getting tired, and he didn't like getting hit, and he just didn't like getting roughed up. So, I think Ross is going to stay in there, hang in there, and eventually he's going to hit him, and Laprise is going to go down.
All right, now, Paulo, do you like Ross Pearson or Chad Laprise?
I like Ross Pearson because Ross Pearson alternates wins and losses, and he's coming off a loss, so he's going to win.
All right, that does it for Paulo's spectacular breakdown. As for me, probably not going to be too much better than that. I like Ross Pearson here. I am siding with him because although he's declining it and maybe doesn't have tons left in the tank, Chad Laprise really just hasn't been that impressive in his UFC tenure. He's picked up wins over decent fighters. Brian Barberena I'm pretty high on. Obviously beat Sage Northcutt. I actually like MMA Genius. I thought Barberena won that fight as well. Chad Laprise did not look good, of course, in the Trinaldo fight in Saskatoon. Last August, he got pounded up for the first round TKO loss. I think this is a good matchup. Stylistically, it should be a fun fight. I just don't think Laprise is at that level quite yet. All around, for his all-around skill set, to beat a veteran like Ross Pearson. I'm not saying Laprise will never be a fighter that can beat mid-tier fighters, but I just don't think he's there yet. I think he's too raw of a fighter to beat a guy like the real deal. I do think Ross Pearson shows up in this one. I like him to get the decision nod. Moving on, we got Rich Walsh taking on Viscardi Andrade. Daniel, I'll start with you. Do you like Andrade here or Richie Walsh?
I'm going to go with Viscardi just because, with Richie, he's got the will to win, but sometimes his chin doesn't hold up, and he's just not at that level. And with Viscardi, he's been in there with better guys. He's gotten a decision with Musoki, and he looked much improved against Gasanu Malatov, and that was after a big layoff. So I expect him to look even better here, and I think he's going to take home either a knockout or a decision over Richie Walsh.
All right, Paolo, do you like Viscardi Andrade here, or will filthy Rich Walsh get the job done?
When I looked at this card, for some reason, the Australian fighters were given really hard matchups here. I think some of the biggest underdogs here are Australian, so I think they might go winless here. But I'm gonna buck that trend. I'm gonna say Richie Walsh is gonna win, just so they don't go winless. Maybe he's gonna get the hometown on his side, and it's gonna persevere and win. But Daniel broke it down there. I think Andrade is just a better fighter overall. He's physically better, and Richie Walsh has been knocked out in the past, so he could get knocked out, maybe dropped, maybe submitted. But I think he's gonna do what he does best: dirty up the fight, live up to his name of Filthy Rich, and take home a split decision or something like that.
All right, now MMA Genius, do you like? I believe the slight underdog here, Viscardi Andrade, or will Filthy Rich Walsh get the job done?
You guys pretty much hit it on. I mean, if Rich Walsh was gonna win this fight, he's gonna have to make this fight filthy. He's gonna have to make it ugly. Andrade is definitely probably a better fighter, slightly all around, but Rich Walsh is tough, and he might be a little bit grittier, but I don't know who I have. It's a 50-50 fight. I'll probably lean Rich Walsh as of right now.
It's a close fight. I do lean with the Australian here. I just haven't been overly down impressed with Viscardi. Not that I've been impressed with Rich in his UFC tenure in the past little while. I do think his grittiness and toughness will play a factor in this fight. I think it's probably what's going to win him the fight. I think he's going to make it into a close and competitive decision, but
and it is in his hometown.
Yes, he does have the hometown advantage. That always plays a factor, especially it seems even more as kind of prelim fighters, because when you're at a high level, sometimes it doesn't really matter. But I can see why some people would play that into the fight as a factor and things like that. But I do like Rich Walsh here. But I think he makes it dirty. I like him by decision here. Moving on, we got Leslie Smith welcoming back Rin Nakai to the UFC. Paula, do you like Rin Nakai here or Leslie Smith?
I like Rin Nakai better than Leslie Smith in reasons outside fighting, but we won't get into that. I'm just happy to see this girl back. I mean, I remember in the MMA Hour when Ariel Helwani asked Miesha Tate what happened to Rin Nakai, she said, oh, she got injured and she's probably not going to fight anymore. So that was a bald-faced lie. Well, she's back now, and she's not a good fighter, man. Honestly, there's nothing much to say about her. She's almost people talk about CM Punk, Kimbo Slice, Dada 5000, just the circus shows. I mean, Rin Nakai is really close to that category, and the only reason she's there is because she gets eyeballs on the TV. So I don't know. Leslie Smith, she's not that good of a fighter either for me to lay what is she right now, minus 140, minus 160 or something like that. I mean, when she was an underdog, then yeah, I would have jumped on that, but my book didn't open it fast enough. But Leslie Smith by decision, man. I don't think Rin Nakai is going to be able to do anything to her.
MMA Genius, do you like Rin Nakai to rebound from her loss to Misha Tate, the new champion now, or will the Peacemaker get the job done?
This this is kind of, no offense to the ladies out there, but it's kind of just a
A
piss
bad
break
fight.
fight, bathroom break fight. But only reason, I mean, but actually, man, in girl fight betting wise, if on a chick fight, the decision prop hits most of the time. For the fight to go 3 rounds. So that's the only thing I see worth in this fight. I don't really care who wins. I'll lean Smith, but yeah, like Paolo said, dude, I watched that Nakai versus Tay fight. Like, all she did was run away. Like, it was so bad. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, I got Leslie Smith.
All right, Daniel, do you like Rin Nakai here, the underdog, or will Leslie Smith pick up her first win in quite some time?
I got Leslie Smith just because I feel like she's fought, tougher competition, and that's it. She's going to win a decision, and her ear's not going to explode this time.
All right, I'm going to go with Leslie Smith here as well. Rin Nakai probably should be on the Your fight card coming up on Sunday with Tank Abbott taking on Dan Severn. Like, she just fits the bill for that card. I really believe so. Leslie Smith, they both haven't fought in a while, I believe. I can't recall Leslie Smith's last fight. It was the eye fight, actually, back in November 2014, I believe.
That was when her ear blew up, man.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been a while for her, and then Nakai hasn't fought since her debut against current champion Misha Tate. There's no shame in losing to Tate, of course, but Rin Nakai just really did not look impressive. She didn't look good in that fight whatsoever. Don't let her record of 16-1-1 fool you, and don't let Smith's record of 7-6-1 fool you. It should probably be the other way around. Leslie Smith, I think, is just the better fighter when it comes down to every aspect of mixed martial arts. Rin Nakai just really isn't that good of a fighter. She just didn't fight that that high level competition whatsoever. Besides Tate, I'm gonna go with Leslie Smith here. It's kind of a coin flip fight. It could go either way, but I'll side with Leslie Smith. A fun fight. We got Daniel Hooker taking on Mark Adiva in a featherweight matchup. Paulo, do you like the Diva here or the Hooker?
Well, I like Hooker to win here because I think Hooker is just a better fighter. I mean, I'm Filipino, so you can't say I'm being biased. I mean, I really want Adiva to win. I really want the Filipino fighters, especially because he's from my hometown, my little tiny hometown up in the mountain provinces. So, gotta represent. But I think Hooker's just so much better, and he's so much tougher, man. I mean, if you watch that fight against Blanco, I don't know if that was a short notice fight for him, but he looked so bad in that fight, and Blanco was piecing him up, and he still finished the fight. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't get finished. So I don't think Adiva's gonna finish him, especially because he's gonna probably try to brawl. And I think Hooker's one of the biggest locks in this card. I think Hooker's gonna finish Adiva late or win a decision.
All right, Daniel, do you like Daniel Hooker here, the Australian, I believe, maybe the New Zealander? Yeah, New Zealander. Or will the Filipino Mark Adiva get back into the winning column?
I agree with Paulo that Hooker's going to win, but, I actually don't think he looked that bad against Blanco. I know he got hit a lot, but he showed some qualities that I really admire. That heart, that will to win. He kept going until the end, just like you mentioned. And, in that fight with Ian Entwistle, obviously you saw what Entwistle did to Burchak, who's a really good wrestler. And, Hooker pounded out Ian Entwistle. He got out of those heel hooks. And, he had a pretty decent showing against Yair. So I think in this spot, Mark Adiva is a really tough guy. He's gone to split decisions with Levan Mahishvili. Who else did he go to a split decision with? Someone else. But he's had two really close fights in the UFC. And then Kevin Souza, that one went closer than I thought as well. So he rocked Kevin Souza, but I still think Hooker, he's going to use his range, his length here, and he's either going to TKO him or get a decision.
All right, I'm going to go with Daniel Hooker as well. Before I break down that fight, though, MMA Genius, do you like Daniel Hooker or Mark Adiva?
From a betting perspective, you know, I could see someone taking a shot on a diva just based on the fact that Daniel Hooker, yeah, he's a tough guy, but I mean, like you said, he gets hit a lot. But I do think he is a better fighter, but he gets hit. So it's like Adiva's tough. He's definitely gonna brawl. He's got power in the early rounds. He'll fade late. Hooker should be fine, but in the late rounds you're gonna be sweating this one. So I'm gonna have to pass on Hooker from betting wise, but I'll pick him in Top Master or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Daniel Hooker here as well. I'm not overly confident in him because I do think Marco Diva is a better fighter than maybe his record shows. He lost 11 matches really just Styles made that fight there. And he looked good against Kevin Souza until getting knocked out in that second round by TKO. Dan Hooker, although has been really impressive. I do think he looked decent in that Yair Rodriguez fight. I know I'm really high on Yair, relatively high. Daniel is really high on Yair Rodriguez, the tough Latin America winner. Hooker, though, has looked pretty impressive. That knockout win back last year, I believe, was really impressive. Hooker, I think his striking is gonna be what wins him this fight. His ground game is improving as well. The Diva, I think I just don't think he's on the level of Dan Hooker at this time. I used to be pretty high on Adiva. He's lost a few in a row though, and he's been out of action for a little while as well. For all those reasons, I gotta go with Dan Hooker here to win a decision. It would not surprise me if he gets a finish late in the second or third round. The headlining prelim on Fox Sports 1 and Fight Network and Fight Pass up in Canada, we got Alan Jouban taking on Brendan the Badger O'Reilly. Paulo, do you like Jouban here or O'Reilly?
I really like Jouban here. The thing about O'Reilly is I'm really not that high on him. I mean, I admire that he has a lot of fighting spirit. He's got a lot of toughness in him, so you got to admire those qualities. So you can't really teach those qualities in a fighter. So he can still develop and grow and develop the skills that you can teach him. But I don't like him at this spot, man. I think Jouban's gonna wreck him quickly, man. It could be like the Richie Walsh fight where O'Reilly's just trying to dirty up, trying to like push him up against the fence, and like Jouban's just gonna kill him from the inside. But the thing about Jouban is he doesn't have the best chin, but O'Reilly doesn't have the best punching power either. So you gotta, if you want to knock out Jouban, you gotta cut his head off clean, like what what's his name? Tumenov. I was gonna say Tysonov, but yeah, Tumenov, like what Tumenov did. And I don't think O'Reilly's gonna head kick his head off. So I'm picking Jouban.
Yeah, I agree. Daniel, do you like Jouban here or the Badger?
I mean, this is a showcase fight for Alan Jouban, and he's gonna go out there. He's going to put away Brendan O'Reilly in the first round. I know that Jouban has a tendency to get rocked in every single one of his fights, and then he comes back and knocks the guy out. I don't think he's going to get rocked here, man. I think he's going to have a clean performance, get a nice little performance of the night in under 1.5 rounds.
MMA Genius, will Jouban get back into the winning column, or will Brendan O'Reilly continue his winning streak?
Yeah, man, I got Jouban all day. I mean, Brendan O'Reilly, I respect him. He's a tough dude, but I just think this is a fight to get Jouban back on track. I think he's going to, what Connor would say, butcher his body. I just think he's going to land his left kick all day, and eventually O'Reilly will just, if it goes 3 rounds, Jouban wins, but I think he finishes him.
I agree. I really like Alan Jouban here. I'm not really high on Brendan O'Reilly. I picked him in his last fight against, I want to say, Vic Grucic. But that was a close fight, and it's Vic Grucic. This guy, I believe, is making his welterweight debut. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was a lightweight, and now he's moving up to welterweight. That's not going to go well for him. Alan Jouban, despite getting destroyed by Albert Tumenov destroys just about everyone. Alan Jouban, I do believe his chin is decent. He can take a fair bit of punishment, and his hands are, of course, heavy as well. So I like Jouban to knock out Brendan O'Reilly sometime during the fight, probably in the second, midway through the fight. I don't see this fight being too competitive. Jouban is not the best of the best. O'Reilly can get the upset here, but I definitely don't see it happening. It would be relatively surprising if it does happen. I'm going to go with Alan Jouban here by a knockout in the first or second round. Kicking off the six-fight main card is a women's strawweight matchup between Beck Rawlings and Si-Hee Ham. Daniel, do you like Ham here or Beck Rawlings?
I like CEO He Ham here by decision.
Paolo, what about you?
Yeah, I like Seohee Ham here. Now the thing is, Hamderley Silva, which is one of the coolest nicknames ever out there. Yeah, man, no, I think this is going to be an underrated fight, man. I mean, it's not going to be the highest level kind of striking fight, but I think it's going to be fairly entertaining because both these girls like to throw down. Now, I think the bet that's worth making here is the over. I mean, if you parlay that with the other women's fight, I think that's at even odds right now, and I think that's going to cash so easily, man. Both these girls are tough, and they don't have any finishing power, and neither of them is going to submit the other. So, bet that all day.
All right, MMA Genius.
Yeah, like
Seohee Ham get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I really don't care who wins the fight, but fight goes to decision all day. Hit that fight goes to decision prop all day, and I'll probably pick like Rawlings, I guess, just because she's the underdog in Talmaster or something like that. But I could see Ham winning a decision, but who cares?
I'll go with Beck Rawlings here. I think she gets the job done. She looked really good in her last fight with, I believe, a first-round submission. Seohee Ham looked good against Courtney Casey in her last outing back in the UFC debut in South Korea. That was a very good fight that I believe picked up Fight of the Night honors. It deserved that. This will be a fun fight. I definitely think this will be one you should tune in for. It's definitely a candidate for Fight of the Night on this card. I think both Beck Rawlings and Ham will throw down. It's a close fight. I'll side with Beck Rawlings, though, to get a decision. But honestly, a finish in this fight later in the round, later in the fight, would not surprise me. Moving on, we got James DeHuna, who's returning for the first time since being submitted by Nate Marquardt in 2014, taking on the Canadian hockey goon, Steve Bosse. Daniel, do you like DeHuna here or Bosse?
I like DeHuna here. Now, I know a lot of people aren't too confident because, he is coming off 3 losses, all first-round finishes, and it has been a couple years since he's fought, but you guys got to understand, the person he's going up against, not only did Steve Bosse already retire, the reason he came back was because you remember the whole Fabio Maldonado and Rampage situation where Bellator tried to pull that injunction. So they brought in Steve Bosse to fight Fabio Maldonado. The event was in Canada. They hit him up. He was on the couch, and he was like, all right, I'll take this opportunity of my life. And, yeah, so then that fight fell through. Rampage ended up fighting Maldonado, and they put Steve Bosse up against Thiago Moreta. And Moreta literally, he shouted out to his corner man. They threw him a baseball bat inside the octagon. He took that baseball bat, he swung it like Mark McGuire, and he decapitated Steve Bosse. So, this is the first time that someone comes back from the dead in the UFC. So for that reason, I 100% have James DeHuna inside the distance here because one doesn't simply return from that vicious knockout to the hands of Thiago Moreta. So I definitely have James DeHuna. I think he either knocks him out in the first round or submits him in the first round. He's got to fight dumb as hell to lose this fight. If he loses, he'll get clipped because this guy is one of those hockey goons, like you said. He only has hands, but those hands aren't UFC caliber, and DeHuna's going to finish him.
All right, Paulo, do you like our Canadian pride, Steve Bosse here, the boss, or will James DeHuna return successfully?
Man, like
Go,
DeHuna
Bosse.
should win. DeHuna should win this. I want to say fairly easily, but you can't say fairly easily when his chin isn't exactly the best itself. Yeah, Bossy got his head taken off, and Tahuna also got his head taken off by Shogun. So, but Tahuna's just so much better than Bossy everywhere. So I think he beats him up. Beats him up in 2 rounds and finishes him. But no bet for me on this one.
All right, MMA Genius, do you like Steve Bosse here, the slight underdog, or maybe the heavy underdog? I'm not sure. The underdog for sure, though. Or will James Tahuna get the job done?
James Tahuna, second round TKO. It might get hairy in the beginning of the fight just because Tahuna's kind of a meathead, but he'll do something stupid and get out of it, but he'll somehow touch his chin and Boss will go down.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tahuna here as well. I like him by knockout in the first round. I would like to see Steve Bosse win this fight because he's Canadian, and Canadians are just good. They're the best. You got to root for Canadians. But he has one way of winning this fight, right? It's by knockout, and like Daniel said, his knockout power and his striking probably isn't even UFC caliber. The reason you don't bet the house on this fight, though, is because either guy has a puncher's chance. Either guy can go down because neither has a good chin. Tahuna has been out for a long, long time, so it's going to be interesting to see if he shows up decent or if he shows up really rusty and maybe Bosse can clip him and knock him out. That would not surprise me too much.
Plus the IV ban. Tahuna looks pretty big for a middleweight, man.
Yes, he will, because he used to be a 205er. He will have a tough time cutting down to 185. Bosse used to be a 205er as well, but he looks okay at 185 to me. He doesn't look like it takes a ton to get down to middleweight. Just in my opinion, anyways. I could be completely wrong. Maybe he'll even miss weight without the IV. Without IVs, I'm not sure, but I'm going to go with Tahuna here. I think he's a better striker. He gets the knockout in the first round, but nothing will surprise me because it's James Tahuna, who hasn't fought since 2014, and it's Steve Bosse, who always has a puncher's chance. Moving on, we got Dan Kelly taking on Antonio Carlos Jr. And Daniel, your rule is always pick Daniels, but are you going with the biggest underdog here?
Well, that is not my rule because I have bet against Daniel Cormier before, and I will do that again next month. And I'm betting against Daniel here as well. All respect to Dan Kelly because he is a judo Olympian in Australia, and he's a badass down there. But I think that Antonio Carlos Jr. is going to teach him a lesson about that new age of fighting because this is just a big middleweight. This is a guy that used to fight at heavyweight. Then he fought at light heavyweight. Now he's at middleweight, which is the optimal weight class for him. And, dude, he's a big middleweight. He's a very physical middleweight. And I think he's going to body him and finish him in the second round. So, yeah, I got Antonio Caro de Zapato, Carlos Jr.
All right, Paolo, are you going with Carlos Jr. here, or will Dan Kelly get the job done in front of his hometown crowd and shock the world?
No, it'd be something if Dan Kelly shocks the world and wins here. I think that might be a good. That might be one of the biggest wins in Australia ever, but that's not gonna happen, man. I don't think so. The only thing I'm concerned with Cara de Zapato is the weight cut, like we mentioned, man. This guy's huge, man. This guy, I was surprised he was able to cut down to middleweight because he's big, and I thought Eddie Gordon was a pretty chunky middleweight, right? And he made Eddie Gordon look like his little brother in there, so. I think he's going to do the same with Dan Kelly. He's going to big brother him in there and either finish him standing up or TKO him from top position, ground and pound. So Cara de Zapato, hopefully doesn't have any problems making weights because that might get hairy if he does.
All right, MMA Genius, do you like Daniel Kelly here, or will Antonio Carlos Jr. get the job done?
I think this is going to be the coming out party for Carlos Jr. here. I think he's just going to overwhelm him. I think, he's training at one of the best teams in the world, ATT. This dude throws heat. Like Daniel said, he used to fight at heavyweight, and I just don't think Daniel Kelly is going to be able to withstand that early barrage. and I think that he's gonna get knocked out. But I mean, I respect Dan Kelly to be doing what he's doing at that age. But I just think Carlos Jr. is gonna open some eyes this weekend.
Yeah, I hate to keep agreeing with everyone, but I'm gonna go with Antonio Carlos Jr. here as well. I like the Brazilian here inside the distance. Although, now looking at his record, I don't think he's ever won a fight by knockout. Dan Kelly though really doesn't have that great of a chin. He looked decent against Steve Montgomery, but Montgomery really just isn't UFC caliber. That's why he was cut. This is a closer fight than the odds indicate, I believe, but I still do like Carlos Jr. here. I think the size will play an advantage. I think, and I do think he picks up his first TKO win of his career, simply because Kelly, I tend to fade the Australian quite a bit in his UFC fights. I just don't think he's been that impressive ever since that fight with Walsh, I think his name is. That I think one of the worst fights in the UFC history. I think Carlos Jr. knocks him out. I don't think Kelly has that good of a chin. I think Carlos Jr. will pick up his first TKO win here. Moving on, we got a very interesting lightweight matchup between Jake Matthews and Johnny Hollywood Case. Paolo, do you like Jake Matthews here or Johnny Case?
You know, like the lines indicate, this is a pretty tough matchup. I mean, we got two young guns coming up here trying to make a name for themselves. And the thing is, even though they're both kind of young, Jake Matthews is super young. Like, I mean, Johnny Case is only like 26, which is like he hasn't even hit his prime yet. But Jake Matthews is like the Australian Sage Northcutt. You know, the guy's like 21 years old or something like that. And I mean, I think his base is like he's a grappler, but he's rounding out his striking. The thing about him though is he gets a little bit reckless sometimes, man. I mean, I guess he's got that teenage, the teenage hormones going on or something like that. And whenever he hurts a fighter or he gets him in a position he wants, he can get a bit overly aggressive. The thing is, if you can't finish Case, I can see Case taking over and maybe in the later rounds, and so a bit just based off of his experience. But I mean, it's a coin flip fight for me. I'm gonna go with Johnny Case here, even though the gym he's training in Power MMA, as Daniel and MMA Genius is gonna elaborate, hasn't been doing that hot. But I'm gonna go with Johnny Case here, maybe to win a 29-28.
All right, Emily Genius, do you like Johnny Case here, the favorite now, actually, the slight favorite, or will the Celtic Kid continue his winning streak?
I mean, this fight is pretty much a 50-50 fight. I do think Johnny Case is a better fighter. I think he has slightly better striking. He slightly puts it together better, but Johnny Case isn't really a prospect when you think about it. I mean, this dude has 26 fights, He's been around for a long time before the UFC. Jake Matthews is a really young kid, like you said, and he's always improving. And, Johnny Case, his camp situation, he might not be improving that much. And, I think he still is a better fighter, but I could see him being lackadaisical at times and, and just doing immature things, and Jake gaining momentum. And he is in Australia. Anything Jake probably does, the crowd is going to react really loud. He's going to get that hometown crowd. And if it's close, it could go his way on the scorecard. So, it's a 50-50 fight. If Case was the underdog here, like plus 150, then I'd definitely take the shot on him. But I got Jake Matthews here.
Yeah, and it looks like Nick might have left the call, but good news. I'm taking Jake Matthews here. I'll tell you why, man. It's a lot of people say it's a 50-50 fight, but here's how I see it. With Johnny Case, while he might be the more technical fighter, firstly, he is training at Power MMA. That's not something that you can look past. That's important because look who's training there. Bader, CB, Jury, Sarafian, the guy that fought Kendall Grove. What's happened since all these guys have moved to Power MMA? They've all lost and not looked like themselves. Ryan Bader's shooting for takedowns without even setting them up, and Miles Jury's dropping to a weight class he doesn't belong in. Daniel Sarafian, what happened in that fight? Stevie Dalloway's getting knocked out by Nate Marquardt. You got to fade Power MMA. Now, as far as Johnny Case is concerned, he's had some success in the UFC. He does have some clean striking, but he gets taken down in every single one of his fights. But he's been up against guys that'll let him back up. I don't think Jake Matthews is going to let him back up. And, Jake Matthews, he got that learning lesson out of the way by James Vick. James taught him a lesson. And now that, that's out the way, he came back in his next fight against Akbar Areola. He overcame some serious adversity with that head kick, showed me the qualities that he has the heart of a champion. And I think that's going to, be you're going to notice that here, because with Johnny Case, he's tapped to strikes before, man. That's not something, that you just if you've tapped to strikes in the past, you might tap to strikes in the future. And, Jake Matthews has no quit in him. I know James tapped him out, but if you get in Vic's guillotine, dude, he's gonna tap you out. It doesn't matter who you are. So, yeah, I definitely got Jake Matthews here for the upset, even though he's a slight underdog. But yeah, Jake Matthews.
I'm going to go with Johnny Case here. I think the age may play a factor. I think just a bit more mature as a fighter. I think his experience will also play a factor. And then, honestly, his overall game. I was really impressed with Jake Matthews up until the James Vick fight. He didn't look that good in that fight. And then he goes up against Akbar Areola, and Areola comes very, very close to finishing him in the first round. And we're talking about Akbar Areola nearly finishing Jake Matthews. Now, I'm not as high as I was on Jake Matthews anymore. I'm not saying he's never going to be a top guy anymore. But at 20 years old, at 19 or 20, I think he has a lot of room to develop, but I don't think he's quite there yet at this point. I think Johnny Case, I think his striking will play a big advantage, play a big part in this fight. I think he'll be able to keep it on the feet for the most part. Like Daniel mentioned, he does get taken down quite a bit, and that's why there is a clear path to victory for Matthews. And that's why this fight is so close. Picking it, and of course odds, I'm going to side with Case here. I think he finds a way to, if taken down, get back up and eventually win a close decision with his strikes. Moving on, we got the co-main event of the evening. This is a fight I've been looking forward to for quite some time. We got a welterweight matchup between Hector Lombard, who's returning after busting for performance-enhancing drugs following his fight with Josh Bergman back in January of 2015, taking on rising contender Neil Magny. Paolo, do you like show weather here, or will Neil Magny pull off the win?
Well, in regards to Hector Lombard getting busted for something, it wasn't just for something. He got busted for steroids, man, anabolic steroids. Now that's like the pinnacle of what you don't want to get busted for, because now everyone's going to start questioning, oh, was he ever really that good? Has he always been using? I mean, he's had some pretty explosive knockouts. He's a pretty explosive fighter. I mean, one does not simply ragdoll Jake Shields, and he ragdolled him for pretty much most of that fight, and he just played it safe. He could have finished him at some point. But so yeah, it's hard to say what he's going to look like now. That's why I think he's an underdog right now, and why people are taking a shot at Neil Magny. There's also that matter of reach. I think they have like Neil Magny has like a 9-inch, 8-inch reach advantage over Hector Lombard, and that's pretty big, man. I mean, if Lombard can't close that distance, I can see Neil Magny like outpointing him to like a 30-27 or something. But I mean, if the old Hector Lombard shows up, I think he can ragdoll Neil Magny and probably win at some point.
All right, Daniel, do you like Neil Magny here, who is now the slight favorite? Odds opened with Hector Lombard as the favorite, but now the lines have flipped and Neil Magny is favored, possibly because Hector Lombard busted for steroids in his last outing and has been out for a long time. Do you like him, or do you like Neil Magny?
Hector Lombard's a really good fighter, man. He obviously he can knock anyone out, and his judo background, not a lot of people talk about that, but that fight with Jake Shields, very impressive. And, obviously he's been around the block. He's fought everyone. He's super experienced. The biggest issue when you're picking him in a fight like this is, firstly, he is about 38 to 39 years old. He's coming off a year layoff. And, in that last fight against Bergman, dude, I wasn't that impressed with his performance. I'll tell you why. It's not just the fact that he didn't finish a guy that he should have finished and that he would have finished in his prime. It's the fact that he looked a little slower to me. He looked older to me. And, apparently he was on that Brazilian help, if you know what I mean, and he still looked kind of slow. So to me, that says that post USADA Hector is going to be even slower, and you got a 9-inch reach disadvantage that you got to work with. You're going up against the guy with the longest reach in welterweight history, a guy who's consistently improving every single fight, who looks like a different guy every single fight, a guy who once couldn't wrestle, a guy who once got knocked out by Mike Ricci, and now he's out wrestling Kelvin Gastelum. So I'm very impressed with Neil Magny. He's got that will to win. He always wants to fight, and he uses his range well, in my opinion. And, in the past, he was very hittable, but he's gotten really good at using that range. I feel like if you're betting on Hector in this fight, what's going to happen is, the first round he's going to come out there and he's not going to really throw too many strikes. You're going to be screaming at your TV, Hector, start throwing, and he's going to get picked apart by that jab. Neil's going to be on his bike, and he's going to win a decision or a late TKO.
All right, MMA genius, do you like Hector Lombard, or will Neil Magny pick up the biggest win of his career?
Like Daniel and Paolo said, I mean, the factors coming into this fight is Hector's coming off a 2-year layoff, and he's coming off the magma, so it's like I feel like Hector is a better fighter overall than Neil. I know if this is Hector, the Hector that fought Jake Shields, he would ragdoll Neil. He'd probably run through him, but I don't expect that guy to show up. I think Neil is very active and he's always throwing, and Hector likes to play around and fight close and likes to look pretty. And like we watched the Tim Bosch fight, we watched the Yushin Okami fight. Like, he could have done more. He could have finished Jake Shields, but he let him survive. He lets guys survive, and if he lets Neil survive, that's good for Neil. And honestly, you could parlay Neil. But if Hector showed up to the Hector that we knew before the UFC, or just on his initial run, like the dude that fought Neil's teammate, Nate Marquardt, that dude would run through Neil, but I don't expect that guy to show up, so I got Neil.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you guys. I like Neil Magny here as well. I really like Hector Lombard as a fighter, but honestly, more than anything, I think the size advantage is going to be the biggest factor in this fight. I don't think it's going to be Hector Lombard coming off this steroid bust. Will he be the same? Will he be deflated? Will he be slower? Will he be this and that and this and that? I honestly think the biggest factor people should be talking about is Neil Magny having a 9-inch reach advantage, a 7-inch leg reach advantage, and being 6 inches taller. That is huge in fighting. I think he'll be able to keep this distance. Like Daniel said, he used to be hittable, but he's gotten a lot better because he's been active. He's had tons of fights from the beginning of 2014 till now. Like, it's been like 11 or 12, which is insane over the course of 2 and a bit years. He's like the Cowboy Cerrone and kind of like Max Holloway as well. I honestly think remaining active like this is a huge benefit to fighters. We've seen that. I think more fighters should be that active like Neil Magny is and has been doing. I think that's going to play a part. I think the layoff for Hector will play a part. And, of course, you got to talk about the steroid bust. Will Hector be the same? We don't know. Maybe he'll be slower. It's tough to say. If he gets inside, he could knock out Neil Magny. Neil Magny has showed off that he doesn't have the best chin. But I do think the size advantage will play a big enough factor in this fight. I think Neil Magny will be able to keep him at range. I don't think he'll allow Hector to come inside. I really like Neil Magny here to get the job done by decision and to pick up the biggest win of his career. Now, moving on, we got the main event of the evening. We got Mark Hunt, the number 9 ranked heavyweight fighter in the UFC, and we got Frank Mir, former champion, number 10 in the UFC.com rankings. Paulo, do you like Mark Hunt here or Frank Mir?
Oh, man, this is really tough, man. I can't make up my mind on this fight. The way I see it, this fight could end really quickly with Mark Hunt dusting Frank Mir down the line, or Frank Mir ending it quickly by subbing Mark Hunt. I mean, Cody Safdich made a good point on on a Fight Network that most of Mark Hunt's submissions, if not all of his submissions, have come via some kind of arm lock. And what Frank Mir really good at, snatching people's arms and submitting them. I mean, we all remember what he did to Big Nog and freaking popped his elbow, one of the most gruesome subs ever. And the Tim Boach when he popped his forearm there. He could do that to Mark Hunt, but Mark Hunt showed in a Verdum fight that he's not the same guy that got subbed by Sean McCorkle in like a straight armbar when he was on top. But so, yeah, man, the only thing I'm worried about this fight, if it doesn't end early, if they just stare at each other, they could be a really boring fight, man. That could get ugly and really quickly, and you know what I mean? So, yeah, I think I'm going to go with Mark Hunt here. I think he's going to find Mir's chin at some point, and Mir's going to go down.
All right, Daniel, do you like Frank Mir here, the underdog, or will Mark Hunt get the knockout victory?
Anytime Mark Hunt fights, you definitely got to be worried about someone getting knocked out because Mark Hunt, he's a vicious striker. That left hook is incredible. And his takedown defense is really underrated too, man. He's got good hips, and he went into Fabricio Werdum's guard and survived. So he's definitely been patching up all the holes in his game. And as far as Frank Mir is concerned, a lot of people were saying that it was time for him to retire, and then he came on a little bit of a resurgence himself. So they're meeting each other at a very interesting time. And, it really could go either way, man. Mark Hunt could knock out Frank Mir, but usually when Mir gets knocked out, it's not in the center of the octagon. It's usually he'll go up against the fence and start turtling up, and people will tee off on him like Shane Carwin did. But the times that he has been KO'd in the center of the cage, that was against Junior Cigano and Brandon Vera. So it's going to be interesting to see if Mark Hunt closes that distance, lands a big left hook, a big overhand right, and puts him down. Or, Frank Mir, you can't discount his striking either. He's knocked out a lot of people in his own right. He also has, obviously, his jiu-jitsu is great, but it has been a while since he's tapped someone out, and it has been a while since Mark Hunt has been tapped out. So it's really, as far as who's going to win, I have no clue, but as far as who you should bet on, I mean, the odds say you should bet on Frank Mir because, I mean, look at it. It's about plus 150 for Mir. It's minus 170 for Mark Hunt. I always stay away from that minus 170. So from a betting perspective, take Frank Mir, but who knows what the hell's going to happen. I think someone's definitely going to sleep.
All right, MMA Genius, are you going with Mark Hunt here or Frank Mir?
They pretty much, said everything. I could definitely see Mark Hunt coming out and just storming Frank Mir and Frank Mir going down real quick. But I could see Frank Mir somehow catching him in that whole process and Mark Hunt going down. And we already know what happens if Frank Mir takes Mark Hunt down. Most likely he taps him out. So, from a betting perspective, like Daniel said, you bet on Mark Hunt, of course.
Frank Mir.
Frank Mir. My bad. At plus 170. And then, 150. And then, but, like, it's just worth a shot. Like, when we look at Frank Mir's history against, like, dudes with really good hands like Shane Carwin, JDS, who else has he fought? Who did he fight last? Overeem, Arlovsky, yeah. I mean, he generally loses to those dudes with really good hands, so, I mean, most likely, I'll probably pick Mark Hunt and, like, Tailmaster, but I'll probably bet on Frank Mir.
I'm going to go with Mark Hunt here. I like him inside the distance. I like him to knock out Frank Mir. I don't think it's going to be one of those ground and pound up against the cage. I like him to knock out Frank Mir, and as Daniel says, in the middle of the cage, which is somewhat rare, of course. People have said Frank Mir is on a bit of a resurgence, but I disagree because as Bigfoot Silva and Soa Palele almost knocked out Bigfoot Silva. And then he goes out and knocks out Todd Duffy, who was swinging very wildly, and although a great 2-minute fight and a fantastic knockout, you can't take too much away from a knockout win over Todd Duffy, in my opinion. I don't believe Frank Mir is on this resurgence. He looked really bad in his last outing against Andrei Arlovsky, who of course looked bad as well in his last outing versus Stipe. Mark Hunt, he's, like I said, knockouts over Bigfoot in 2015 and 2016 don't really matter whatsoever. But he has gotten into a bit better shape. He's taking MMA seriously right now. He's training with great guys and things along those lines. I like Mark Hunt here. His power is the last thing that goes. Mark Hunt always has a knockout chance. Frank Mir, his striking has also improved, of course. We have seen that over the past couple of years. But Mark Hunt has a way better chin than Frank Mir does. I would be very surprised to see Mir knock out Hunt, and I do expect Mark Hunt to knock out Frank Mir. On the other hand, I'm definitely picking Mark Hunt here. I would be relatively surprised if Frank Mir is able to win, but it's a heavy fight between two, like a 40-year-old-ish and like a 36-year-old. Anything can happen at this point. Frank Mir could tap him out. I'd be surprised, but it's very possible. Anything can happen. Don't bet this fight if you're a bettor. I would stay away. But I'm definitely picking Mark Hunt here by first round knockout.
Hey,
All right.
so where did Mark Hunt train for this fight?
I remember. I don't remember his gym. I don't remember what it's called, but he trained.
Wasn't it HK?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember, but I remember him getting into way better shape in his last camp.
Yeah, he was in
So the
Thailand.
last one he was at AK Thailand. My question is, was he at AK Thailand for this
No,
fight?
he wasn't.
He wasn't?
No?
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
And Dan Hooker's at Team Elevation now.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's been for a while, training with Neo Mag, and Dan Hooker actually is training with Neo Magny a lot, so it's going to be interesting. But all right, guys, that is the card. UFC Brisbane goes down this Saturday. Going to be an interesting card. Mark Hunt, Frank Mir, Neil Magny, Hector Lombard. Really appreciate all you guys coming on the show once again. Daniel, as always, just let our listeners know where they. Actually, let's quickly hop over to DraftKings. Our DraftKings master over here, Go Paolo. Do you have a team ready that you can share?
Yeah, and I'm actually like flipping over here because this is kind of tough right now. But the one I'm gonna share is the Cash Leaks one because I'm a bit more confident on this one. So I got Patrick, I got Dan Hooker, I got Hector Lombard, I got Ross Pearson, and for the last one, I'm either gonna add Johnny Case or Jake Matthews, depending on which guy I think is gonna end up doing better. Maybe I might put it to Jake Matthews, even though I do pick Johnny Case to win. I think fantasy-wise, Jake Matthews is better.
Okay, I'm going to go with Daniel or Paulo. Can you quickly check if these fighters will fit? I'll go with Alan Joban. I will go with Neil Magny, Johnny Case, Carlos Jr., and Tahuna.
It's not gonna fit, man.
Take
You get like so many expensive guys on there, man. Who else do you have? Wait, you got Junior, Joban, Tahuna.
let's see. Take out Case. How expensive is Case?
You gotta take out either one of Junior, Joban, and Tahuna because those three are the most expensive guys on. Three of the four most expensive guys there, man.
Take out the Brazilian.
Joban.
Brazilian.
You wanted Joban in there, eh? Okay. And then you still want Case in there?
Sure.
Okay. And then you got 9,300 average left, so not a lot of room for. You gotta pick some underdogs in there.
Yeah, give me, I don't know, Rinikai just for the hell of it.
Probably the worst person you can have in there, but okay.
Oh, she'll end up picking up a knockout and it'll all be good. Anyways, Daniel, do you have a team? I'm gonna assume not.
If you want to follow my plays, you go to bestfightpicks.com. You want to follow me on Twitter, you follow me at bestfightpicks. You want to listen to my show, it's called Half the Battle. It's on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you very much.
All right, now, Paolo, where can you find you on social media? Where can you find your writing and everything else you do?
Find me on social media at GoPaoloMMA, like it says down there. Follow my writing at Today's Knockout, at Sportsnet. Yeah, man, just check it all out. We got a couple of articles going on right now. Check out my DraftKings articles, like Nick said. I'm writing this one up, so this should be up soon.
All right, now MMA Genius, appreciate you joining us on the show. Let us know where we can find you on social media and anything else you got coming up.
Yeah, follow me at MMA Genius 05 and follow the Sport Matrix. And thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. All right. And as for me, you can follow me on Twitter at NickUFC. Check out my writing at bloodyelbow.com, MMAsucker.com, and my website, MMAJR.co. I just covered Prestige FC 2 this past weekend. Great card, headlined by Nick Rhodes, taking on Kurt Southern in a featherweight title fight. I did 4 post-fight interviews. Those are up on my YouTube channel where you are right now. So once the show is over, back out and go watch those. I did a Prestige FC recap for Bloody Elbow. Check that out, bloodyelbow.com. You'll find it on the front page, so go read that. My podcast, MMA Junior Radio, I host it each and every week with Andrew the Clown Kid Lawrence. Episode 50, big episode for us, will be dropping tomorrow morning. We have one guest on the show. You probably don't know the name, Vyron Phillips. This is the guy taking on Roy Jones Jr. this weekend at your fight in Phoenix, Arizona. So we got his thoughts on basically being a no-name fighter stepping up against a boxing legend on short notice. So it was an interesting interview. And Daniel's already gone. So Paolo, appreciate you coming on the show as always. And with that, enjoy the fights.